All right, we're recording.
All right, welcome back to Two Beards and a Bible. This here next to me is
Dave Tenney.
and I'm John Swano. We're glad you're with us. Today we're in Matthew 26, and what did you say, starting at verse 57?
57.
Through the end of the chapter, I believe
Yeah.
it is.
And then the first two verses of 27.
Okay.
But we don't need to go. I think if we just go 57 through 68.
Okay. Want me to read that?
Yeah, sure.
All right, starting at Matthew 26 of verse 57. And those who had laid hold of Jesus led him away to Caiaphas, the high priest, where the scribes and the elders were assembled. But Peter followed him at a distance to the high priest's courtyard, and he went in and sat with the servants to see the end. Now the chief priests, the elders, and all the council sought false testimony against Jesus to put him to death, but found none. Even though many false witnesses came forward, they found none. But at last 2 false witnesses came forward and said, "This fellow said, I am able to destroy the temple of God and to build it in 3 days." And the high priest arose and said to him, "Do you answer nothing? What is it these men testify against you?" But Jesus kept silent. And the high priest answered and said to him, "I put you under oath by the living God. Tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God." Jesus said to him, "It is as you said. Nevertheless, I say to you, hereafter you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the power and coming on the clouds of heaven." Then the high priest tore his clothes, saying, "He has spoken blasphemy. What further need do we have of witnesses? Look, now you have heard his blasphemy. What do you think?" They answered and said, "He is deserving of death." Then they spat in his face and beat him, and others struck him with the palms of their hands, saying, "Prophesy to us, Christ, who is the one who struck you?"
Okay. Lots of interesting things in here.
Yeah.
So the first thing is I noticed that. So this is the point where all of Jesus's apostles have left the building.
And verse 56, then all the disciples forsook him and fled.
Yes, they're all gone. So now Jesus is by himself. But one disciple, one apostle, kind of sticks in his neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And that's Peter. And Peter had such strong faith, and he cuts off he gets a sword out and cuts off a guy's ear. I mean, he's really ramped up. Mm-hmm. What happened?
Right.
Because this is like, an hour later.
And I was thinking of this, and I don't want to jump. We can say this again later on as we see a little bit more of the story unfold. But this, in my mind, is a further nail in the coffin of the idea that Christ established his church on Peter.
Right.
And that, that Peter was the first pope and so on.
Right.
Because obviously Peter had his flaws like all men do. And the church was not established on any human being.
No,
it
not
was
at all.
established on the truth.
Yeah.
That was being spoken of.
Absolutely. Jesus says he was going to give Peter the keys to the kingdom. Well, your son has got some problems.
Yeah.
I'm looking at him through the window.
He's special.
One of your sons has got some problems. The other one's pretty good. Anyways, he says Peter's going to get the keys of the kingdom, and that's why we see in Acts chapter 2, Peter preaches the first sermon.
Yeah.
That's the key. He opens it up. He's
Right.
he's the first one to let us know. He opened the door,
Right.
so to speak. But right now, he's not doing so good.
Right.
He kind of runs away. He's at a distance. He doesn't want to. He wants to see what happened, but he doesn't want to be close enough to be associated.
And that's the human part. I mean, we know the end of things, and we know Peter's great faith, and we understand those things. But even at all that, even in seeing the things that he had, there's still that, you've grown up in the world. The government situations are taking place where they've arrested your friend, your savior, and it's understandable from a human point of view why one would be hesitant to go right up there and get yourself arrested.
Right.
It's hopefully we would do better. You'd think in retrospect.
Right, you would think.
Well, I would have done better than Peter, but.
I've heard people say, well, they read about, Jesus being mocked on the cross, and people will say, well, I wouldn't do that. You hear that, John?
That's a cat.
That's a cat. I need something to throw at it. Nope, no, that didn't work.
That's funny. Between my son and that cat.
I tell you what. You know what? That cat, it drives me crazy because I'll scratch on the window and the door. So what I started doing was we give the cat a drink. Mm-hmm. So I'll open the door and throw a cup of water at it. And that works for a couple of days. And then cats just must not have a good memory.
Well, there might be a sermon in that about the persistence of a cat.
The persistence of a cat, yeah. Anyways, what were we talking about?
Peter.
We were talking about Peter, and somehow cats got involved in here. But yeah, people will say, well, if I was those that were around the cross, I wouldn't have mocked Jesus, or I would have done this, or I would have done that. And you know what? You probably wouldn't have.
Right.
I mean, there it is again.
Right.
I'll tell you what, as soon as we're done recording here, that cat's getting a drink. I guarantee you.
Yeah, and we have, all these witnesses being brought forward, and then someone comes forward and says that, and basically speaks what Christ had said, I am able to destroy the temple of God and build it in 3 days. And what was he speaking of when he said that? What?
He was talking about his body. His body.
Right. And not at all. They're taking his words kind of out of context. But it doesn't matter, because it doesn't matter what the guy said. This high priest was just looking for something to get mad about.
It's interesting they brought in all these false witnesses, but none of them would be satisfactory.
Right.
There were no. It says they looked for. Though many false witnesses came forward, they found none. None of them had a good story.
And one thing that we see, and if you study human nature, people that are trying to persuade you, but they don't really have the truth, they spend a lot of time screaming and yelling and putting on a show.
Yeah, that video you showed me the other night of the person wailing on the ground because she had an evil spirit.
Right, and this, what does this high priest do? He tears his clothing, and you can just kind of imagine the show that was being put on, the spectacle.
He was like an ancient Jerry Springer.
Right. Right. And so we can see them for what they are, and it's really just riling up the people around him, just to be able to get the thing, to get the end that he wanted.
Yeah. Certainly, this was a highly unusual trial.
Yeah.
Here you've got the judge, and he says, he has spoken blasphemy. He's the judge before they've even taken a vote. Mm-hmm. Because I believe that's the way the Sanhedrin worked. There was like a voting process. Before they even take the vote, he's pronouncing judgment on Jesus.
Yeah.
And on top of that, I don't believe that blasphemy was something that, deserved the death sentence.
Right. And I'm not even sure that even fits the definition of blasphemy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
But it's just again to rile the people up, and we see that happen today.
Oh, yeah.
We've seen situations where people that are undoubtedly not acting in accordance with the goodwill of others, getting people on their side because they're putting on such a persuasive performance.
Yeah,
and that's especially true in the religious world. We see so many people that can sweet talk a whole crowd, but And if people aren't, and this is why we each and every one have to study, because if we don't study to be able to understand what we're looking at,
Yeah.
we can be deceived.
Yeah. Yeah. You certainly see it. Of course, we're recording this in November right now, and it'll be released, I think, in November towards the end of the month. But it's election time, and you just hear all of this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
These sort of I don't know what do they call that? Gaslighting or all these different
I won't go down my political rants during our podcast, but I'll tell you, on the way home today from the kids' music lessons, I heard a couple of political commercials, and I was talking back to the radio.
Yeah, it just makes you want to bang your head on the steering
So I
wheel.
have to shut those things off, because you can see.
You just turn it off and say, "You don't matter."
You can understand. You can understand if you have your ears open and you have an understanding of the truth. You can understand when people are lying to you.
Yes, absolutely.
And
so it's hard to listen to any political ad.
right, right,
Right.
right.
But certainly, if you know the scriptures, you can certainly tell when somebody's teaching something that's not of the scriptures.
Absolutely.
And I think, the Jews at this time had gone so far down this rabbit hole of making up their own version of the law that they had, this had nothing to do with the old law.
I was just, whether this is on subject or not, I think it applies. Just during Bible study this last week, it came to my mind and now comes to mind again. I have a family member who will often tell me about somebody and say, they really know their Bible. They really know their Bible. And my question is always, well, how do you know?
Yeah, unless you know it.
Yeah, you have to know the Bible to know whether or not someone who is speaking to you is telling you the truth.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just that simple.
Yeah, absolutely. So the high priest tears his clothes and he accuses Jesus of blasphemy, which is false, right? And he says he is deserving of death, which is also not true, right? And then it gets violent. And they spit on him, which is like the most disrespectful thing you can do to somebody else.
Yeah.
And they beat him and hit him in the face. When you hit somebody in the face, man, that's another just disrespectful.
That's what I was thinking. I was trying to think of in the Roman traditions and so on, that hitting someone with your open palm is, I think that's a pretty bad thing.
Yeah. When they say it's a slap in the face.
Yeah. I mean, it's not fun in our society today. It would not be taken well.
Right.
But I think I think that was a pretty disrespectful thing, maybe on a higher level back then.
Yeah, absolutely. So where are we going now? Okay, we're going to go from 69 to the end of the chapter. I'll read that.
Okay.
It says, "Now Peter sat outside in the courtyard, and a servant girl came to him, saying, 'You also are with Jesus of Galilee.' But he denied it before them, saying, 'I do not know what you are saying.' And when he had gone out to the gateway, another girl saw him and said to him who was there, 'This fellow also was with Jesus of Nazareth.' But again he denied with an oath, 'I do not know the man.' And a little later, those who stood by him came up and said to Peter, 'Surely you also are one of them, for your speech betrays you.' And then he began to curse and swear, saying, 'I do not know the man.' Immediately a rooster crowed, and Peter remembered the word Jesus had said to him, 'Before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times.' So he went out and wept bitterly."
So he got the message there.
He did.
We have Judas who did what he did, yet didn't seem
never
to
got
get the
it.
message until it was too late.
Yes.
Well, in
was
fact, was not too late.
Yeah.
He made it too late by his choice. But yeah, and again, thinking with your human mind, you can understand, not being able to get out of human reasoning. You can understand why Peter did what he did under, call it peer pressure.
Yeah.
I don't like that term.
Yeah.
Because it's not a real measurable force in the world, but we are social creatures, and amongst a group of people, oftentimes the people move as one unit.
Yeah.
In a large group.
My favorite part of this, where the servant says, "Surely you are one of them, for your speech betrays you," which lets us know that Peter had an accent. Mm-hmm. And I've gone different places, and maybe we were just in New Hampshire, and we were in a supermarket, and I was talking to somebody in line, and they said, "Are you from down south?" I said, "No, I'm from northeastern Ohio," but I think sometimes people they hear a certain accent and they can't place it.
Right.
Right. And I live in a rural area, so yeah, I've got a little hillbilly redneck in me, so that happens too. But they recognize that Peter wasn't from around there.
Right.
They're like, "Are you from West Virginia?"
Well, kind of.
Kind of, yeah, me too.
In verse 74 there, when he began to curse and swear, saying, "I do not know the man."
Yeah, that's not very Christian-like.
That kind of goes back to, again, when someone is trying to deceive you. The chief priest was doing much the same thing, tearing his clothes and so on. Well, Peter, again, he kind of gave way there. Yeah.
When Jesus first met Peter, and Peter had come in with the nets, and he was probably naked when he did that, and he said, "Lord," he says, "I'm a sinful man." Mm-hmm. And here we see Peter probably kind of fallen back into that fella he used to be.
Yeah.
And I think that can happen to us. Sometimes we can say some things or do some things that we know we shouldn't be doing, but we fall back into some bad habit.
Yeah.
And I've definitely done that in my lifetime. And it's like, okay, hold on.
Whether or not it's useful or not, whether or not it's admissible in a court of law, you think about the lie detector, the what do they call that?
Something graph.
The polygraph.
Polygraph,
test.
yeah.
Yeah. What it does is measures, all of the rise in your pulse, the rise in your breathing rate, all the things that happen to us. And there's even tells with your eyes and so on when someone is lying. And so this is kind of showing proof. People that are telling the truth, people that are confident in the truth, can remain calm.
Yeah.
And they don't have to scream and yell and tear their clothes. And so just, Peter not on the same level as the high priest that we're speaking of here, but nonetheless we see a look into the psychology of man when he tries to deceive others and himself.
But the thing is, this is the redeeming quality of Peter, is when he remembered the words of Christ.
Yeah.
And that cut him to the heart.
Yeah.
When he heard that rooster crow, it just cut him to pieces.
Yeah.
And he went out and wept bitterly. And, that was, I'm sure, the thing that really turned his faith around.
Exactly.
Probably, and then seeing Jesus risen from the dead probably helped a little bit too, I'd imagine.
Right.
But
it is a lesson for each and every one of us, because there's not a one of us who is perfect.
Yeah.
And we fall back from time to time and fall back into our old ways. But here, like you said, there's the key.
Yeah. When Jesus was risen, he goes to Peter and he says, "Peter, do you love me?" He asked him that 3 times. Mm-hmm. And that I think when you read that, Peter is thinking about this event.
Yeah.
This still is something that weighs on his mind, that he fell away. Mm-hmm. We can all do that.
Yeah.
Can you read this first 2 verses of 27?
When morning came, all the chief priests and elders of the people plotted against Jesus to put him to death. And when they had bound him, they led him away and delivered him to Pontius Pilate, the governor.
Okay, so part of the thing with the Sanhedrin makes this decision that they're going to put Jesus to death, but the problem is they don't have any power to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So they're really like a governing body with zero power.
Right.
So they have to now go to Pontius Pilate, who's the governor of that area. And now they're trying to get an actual physical judgment. But they don't have a very good case, which is amazing that, Jesus ends up being sent to the cross.
Mm-hmm.
Because their case is terrible.
Right. I mean, it's happened, if you are up late at night and you watch all of the court TV shows and so on, there are times when people with, people in the law enforcement and legal community have it out for somebody, and they, how even though a terrible case, they make it stick.
Yeah.
And there are, unfortunately, innocent people that have been the victim of that over the years.
Not Judge Judy.
No. And by far, it's a minority, but it does happen.
It always John and I both have this friend also named John. And this John is like 6'3", which, you're what?
I'm 6 foot.
You're 6 foot, so am I. So he's bigger than both of us. And our friend John, his hands like could cover your whole head. He's just a huge man. But he never misses Judge Judy. I called him the other night. I said, "Hey, what you do?" He goes, I'm watching Judge Judy right now. Did you go back? I guess.
Well,
So, hey.
One of the things that I was just thinking, we were talking about Judas earlier, and then there in verse 3, after...
We haven't got there yet.
Okay.
Yes.
I'll be quiet.
Savior, once we get to that in the narrative, you can just open up. So we're going to go to John chapter 18 again.
John 18.
And what do we got? We got about 8 minutes left. John 18. And 28 through 38. We ought to be able to cover that.
All right. I can read that.
You go for it.
John 18, starting at verse 28. Then they led Jesus from Caiaphas to the praetorium, and it was early morning, but they themselves did not go into the praetorium, lest they should be defiled, but they might eat the Passover. Pilate then went out to them and said, "What accusation do you bring against this man?" They answered and said to him, "If he were not an evildoer, we would not have delivered him up to you." Then Pilate said to them, "You take him and judge him according to your law." Therefore the Jews said to him, "It is not lawful for us to put anyone to death," that the saying of Jesus might be fulfilled, which he spoke, signifying by what death he would die. Then Pilate entered the praetorium again, called Jesus, and said to him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered him, "Are you speaking for yourself about this, or did others tell you this concerning me?" Pilate answered, "I am a Jew. Your own nation and the chief priests have delivered you to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would fight, so that I should not be delivered to the Jews. But now my kingdom is not from here." Pilate therefore said to him, "Are you a king then?" Jesus answered, "You say rightly that I am a king. For this cause I was born, and for this cause I have come into the world, that I should bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth hears my voice." Pilate said to him, "What is truth?" And when he had said this, he went out again to the Jews and said to them, "I find no fault in him at all."
Man, that had to have been a slap in the face.
Yeah.
So now they got to switch gears after this.
Well, they knew it already.
Oh, yeah.
When they said, well, if he wasn't guilty, we wouldn't have brought him to you.
Yeah. So I can't imagine that, Pilate was, it says they brought him early in the morning. And they did this for religious reasons. It says, but they themselves did not go into the praetorium lest they should be defiled. So wherever Pilate's at is a Gentile place, and they being Jews, They ain't going in there. He says...
There's all kinds of irony all over that.
So it's early in the morning, and then they make Pilate come out to them because they won't go in.
Right.
So he's probably a little perturbed, I would imagine.
Right.
You know, just think about, going to whatever, so whoever's important in your community,
right.
On Saturday morning at 7:30 in the morning and waking them up and then saying, no, you need to come out here. We can't come in and talk to you.
Right.
You're going to be upset.
Yeah. And then there's all kinds of irony all over that because they're worried about the law.
Yeah.
They're trying to keep the law, yet they're taking the lawgiver and putting him up to be crucified. It just makes your head swim.
Yeah. What are you thinking? He says, what accusation do you bring against this man? Okay, so that makes sense. And they said, then they get a little smart. If he weren't an evildoer, we wouldn't have brought him here. Dummy.
Spoken like a politician.
Yeah, that's exactly what. And then Pilate says, well, then you take him and judge him according to your law. But then they says, it is not lawful for us to put anyone to death. And that probably raised his cackles even more. He's like, okay, what's going on here? Because it had to have been something crazy serious.
Yeah.
And he takes Jesus aside. And it says, then Pilate entered the praetorium again and called Jesus. So Jesus, this is what's interesting. Jesus went in. The Jews wouldn't go in because for some reason they judged it that it would defile them.
Right.
But Jesus, the giver of the law, went in.
Right.
So they must have been wrong.
Yeah, and I'm sure there are many additions to the law that were made by men over the years, just as mankind has done to the new law.
Yeah. If entering into this would have made them unclean, then Jesus wouldn't have gone in.
Yeah.
But Jesus goes in.
Right.
And Pilate just cuts straight to the chase. He says, are you the king of the Jews? So they must have talked to him about this. Right? Why would he ask that question?
Right. Yeah, and Christ even brings that up. Are you speaking for yourself about this, or did someone tell you?
Yeah. And then Pilate says, am I a Jew? And he's not. He says, your own nation and the chief priests have delivered you to me. What have you done?
Right.
And now Jesus tells him that he is a king, but his kingdom is not of this world.
Right.
And Pilate's thinking, well, okay, this guy's crazy. I'm sure that's what he's thinking.
Right. But I can't find anything they did wrong.
Yeah, he's not done anything wrong. He maybe, in my opinion, he's off.
Right.
But he's done nothing wrong.
Right. Yeah, and that, again, all of that kingdom, again, human beings and Pilate being one there, thinking of physical kingdom.
Absolutely. And he's thinking, oh, this guy's the king of the Jews. But then he asks him, and Jesus says, my kingdom is not of this world.
Right.
Okay. He says, that's why he says, if my king were of this world, my servants would fight. And they clearly haven't been fighting. And Pilate says, well, are you a king then? And he says, yeah, I am a king. And he was born to this cause. And then he talks about the truth. And these kind of, I guess, more esoterical subjects.
Right. Yeah, Pilate asking him, what is truth?
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Why do you think he asked that? Was that...
Yeah, because...
Is it sarcastic?
Just like in the world today, everybody has their own truth. I mean, Oprah came out some time ago and talked about truth being something that is individual to each and every person. You have your truth, and you have your truth, and this person has their truth, and I have my truth. Well, that doesn't make any sense, but this kind of lines up with what
she meant is we all have our opinions.
Right.
But the problem is, and this truth is not subjective.
Right.
Right? You can't have your truth. There's only the truth.
Correct. Yeah,
I can't have my truth. you know.
right. It doesn't. Whatever is true, and it's evident by. Again, you can tell how it is by the way that it is.
Exactly.
And with all these people coming to Pilate, like you said, getting him up early in the morning and telling him, that this man is deserving of death, and and he's, well, what's the truth? You tell me what's going on.
What is the truth?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think he was a little sarcastic when he said that.
Right.
But what's funny is Pilate could have been saying that last week.
Yeah. Amen.
What comes around goes around. Right? So he went and said this, and out to the news, and he says, I find no fault in him.
Yeah.
Why'd you guys get me up out of bed?
Right.
So he's a little perturbed about the whole thing, it seems to me. And that is going to end our episode, John. We're at 30 minutes.
All righty. Well, thanks for listening in. Hopefully you found it to be helpful. I know I learned something again. I always learn something when we come together and look into the Word. So,
Me too.
Hope you can join us next time.
Yep.
Thanks.
Thanks.